Have you ever been caught in one of those moments where words are being spoken, smiles are being exchanged, polite laughter fills the air, yet deep inside you feel strangely absent? Perhaps it was at a party, perhaps during a casual lunch break with colleagues, or maybe even while standing in line at a cafe when someone decided to start a conversation about the weather. Outwardly, you nod, you smile, you do everything right. But inwardly, something resists. A heaviness builds. You feel an invisible distance grow between the words being said and the truth of your own inner world. The strange thing is, you probably can't point to anything wrong. The person speaking to you isn't being rude. The topic isn't offensive. The tone of the conversation is perfectly polite. And yet, you sense an emptiness in the air, a kind of hollowness that drains you with every passing minute. You think to yourself, why do I feel so disconnected? Why does this perfectly ordinary conversation feel like a performance I never agreed to take part in? And then, perhaps, the guilt sets in. You scold yourself for being impatient. You tell yourself that other people seem perfectly comfortable in these situations, that they seem to glide through small talk without a second thought while you stand there secretly suffocating. You wonder, am I broken? Am I antisocial? Am I cold or unfriendly? Why can't I enjoy this the way everyone else seems to? But what if this discomfort is not a flaw in your personality? What if it's not rudeness or arrogance or lack of social skills? What if it is something far more profound? Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychologist and founder of analytical psychology, would tell you that the simple fact you dislike small talk reveals something essential about the structure of your soul. Jung believed that the way we respond to the smallest of human interactions is not random. It is a mirror reflecting the deeper orientation of our psyche, and so your discomfort in small talk is not meaningless. It is a clue. It is a sign that your inner life is shaped differently, that your soul is organized around depth, authenticity, and truth rather than surface rituals. Think about it. What happens when the conversation finally shifts away from chatter about the weather or the latest sports score or the endless cycle of polite questions? Suddenly, when the words become real, when someone dares to share their struggle or their hope or their fear, something inside you awakens. You lean in, your energy returns, you feel alive again, as if your soul has been waiting, quietly, for this very moment. This contrast between the emptiness of small talk and the richness of genuine conversation holds the key to understanding yourself, and Jung helps us decode it. Because he reminds us that the psyche is not nourished by surfaces. The soul requires depth. It requires encounters with meaning, with shadow, with truth. Without these, life begins to feel thin, as if you are skimming across the surface of an ocean without ever diving beneath. So, if you have ever felt strange or guilty for disliking small talk, take a breath. You are not alone. And more importantly, you are not defective. Your discomfort is not a weakness. It is a sign that your inner world is oriented toward depth, that your soul is calling you away from surfaces and toward something far more real. And in this journey, we are going to explore exactly what that means. We will walk together through Jung's ideas, through his insights into introversion, the persona, the shadow, and the process of individuation. And we will discover why your dislike of small talk is not a curse but a gift, a signal from your unconscious guiding you toward authenticity. By the end of this exploration, you may find that the very thing you once saw as a flaw is, in fact, one of your deepest strengths. Segment 2. Jung's Lens. The Flow of Psychic Energy. Carl Jung looked at the human soul differently than most psychologists of his time. Where others saw behavior, what people do or say, Jung saw energy, invisible currents moving through the psyche. He believed that every individual has a natural direction for this energy. Some people send it outward into the world, while others draw it inward toward the self. He named these tendencies extraversion and introversion. But for Jung, these were not simply social traits or personality labels, they were movements of the soul itself. When we think of an extrovert today, we often imagine someone who loves parties, thrives on attention, and feels energized in groups. And when we think of an introvert, we often reduce it to shyness, awkwardness, or a dislike of crowds. But Jung's vision went much deeper. For him, the extrovert's energy flows outward like sunlight, constantly seeking the external world, thriving on objects, events, and interactions. The introvert's energy, on the other hand, flows inward like roots reaching into the soil. Their nourishment comes from silence, from reflection, from what stirs beneath the surface. This is why small talk can feel so natural for some and so unbearable for others. For the extrovert, small talk is not trivial. It is the exchange of energy. It is the contact that makes them feel alive, the spark that fuels their spirit. They leave these conversations refreshed, buzzing, eager for more. But for the introvert, the same exchange can feel like a slow leak of vitality. Each polite answer, each rehearsed smile, each predictable question drains energy instead of restoring it. Imagine two people leaving the same gathering. One walks away invigorated, replaying the casual exchanges with joy, feeling fuller than when they arrived. The other walks away exhausted, needing silence, craving solitude, almost desperate to retreat into their own inner world. The difference is not about manners, not about attitude, not even about social skill. The difference lies in the very structure of their energy. And here is where Jung's insight liberates us from guilt. If you are the person who walks away drained, if you are the one who feels restless and empty during small talk, it is not because you are cold or unfriendly. It is because your soul is designed to move inwards. Your nourishment is not in the chatter of surfaces, but in the depths of silence, in the weight of meaning. Think of it like breathing. For an extrovert, small talk is like inhaling fresh air. It replenishes them. For an introvert, small talk can feel like breathing smoke. Each breath depletes rather than restores. And yet, the world rarely sees this difference. Instead, it tells the introvert that something is wrong with them, that they should learn to be more social, more outgoing, more comfortable with chatter. But Jung would disagree. He would say, there is nothing wrong. This is simply the disposition of your soul. Now consider the quiet moment after such a draining exchange. You return home, close the door, take off your shoes, and finally sit in silence. Do you notice how your body sighs in relief? How your mind begins to reorganize itself? That sensation is your energy flowing back inward, the roots returning to the soil. It is not arrogance, it is not avoidance, it is necessity. This is why Jung's understanding of psychic energy is so crucial. He teaches us that introversion is not a choice you made. It is not an attitude you adopted. It is a natural orientation, as real and as unchangeable as your heartbeat. And when you force yourself to ignore it, when you pretend that small talk is nourishing for you when it is not, you only deepen the exhaustion. So the next time you feel that creeping heaviness during small talk, remember this. Your soul is not rejecting people. It is rejecting the surface. It is quietly reminding you that your energy is structured differently, that you are not designed to skim endlessly across the surface of words, but to dive into the depths where meaning lives. Carl Jung once said that introversion is not a defect of the soul, but a richness that looks inward. And so when you find yourself unable to tolerate small talk, it is not a sign of deficiency. It is a sign that your soul is oriented toward depth, that your energy flows inwards, that your very being is built to find meaning not in chatter but in silence, not in surfaces but in truth. Segment 3. The persona, the mask that ties you down. Carl Jung believed that each of us walks through life wearing a mask, Not a literal mask, of course, but a psychological one, a role, a performance, a socially acceptable face that we present to the world. He called this mask the persona. The persona is not evil, and it is not false in the sense of being a lie. It is simply a tool. When you speak politely to a stranger, when you maintain professionalism at work, when you soften your words at a family gathering to keep the peace, you are wearing the persona. It allows you to function smoothly in society. It creates bridges between people. Without it, human interaction would collapse into chaos. But the persona is only a fragment of who you are. It is not your whole being. It is not your inner essence. It is only the part of you that can safely appear in public. And here lies the problem. Many of us are forced to wear the mask for so long and with such intensity that we forget it is a mask at all. We begin to believe that the persona is the self. Now think about small talk. What is small talk if not a ritual of personas? Two people meet, exchange surface words, smile politely, ask the same questions they have asked 1,000 times before, and then walk away. Rarely do these conversations reveal anything raw, vulnerable, or true. Instead, they are exchanges between masks. This is why small talk feels so exhausting, because you are not truly there. Your soul is not present. Only the mask is. You smile, you nod, you play the role, but inside, the deeper part of you is silent, waiting, restless. It whispers, "This is not me. This is only my mask." And after minutes or hours of such performance, you feel depleted, as though you have spent your energy holding up a facade that grows heavier with every passing word. Think of the times you have come home after a gathering filled with light conversation. Perhaps you felt an almost physical fatigue. Your body slumps. Your mind feels dull. You crave silence not because you dislike people, but because you need to put down the mask. In the safety of solitude, you can finally breathe again. You can finally return to yourself. Jung warned that when the persona is mistaken for the true self, life becomes shallow, rigid, and hollow. Imagine a person who wears their mask so completely that they forget it is not their face. They smile, they laugh, they play their role perfectly, and the world praises them as social, charming, successful. But inwardly, their soul cries out. Inwardly, they are empty, because the mask has replaced the self. This is what happens to many in the endless cycle of small talk. They live in ritualized words and gestures, but never reveal themselves. They never speak from their depths, and eventually they begin to feel invisible, even to themselves. Now ask yourself, how many times have you smiled politely while secretly longing for the conversation to end? How many times have you asked, "How are you?" knowing that the answer will be as predictable as your own? How many times have you endured the ritual when all you wanted was silence, or better still, a real conversation about something that mattered? This is the weight of the persona. It is not that you dislike people. It is that you dislike the endless maintenance of the mask. Because while you are busy keeping it in place, managing your expressions, adjusting your tone, choosing polite but empty words, you are unable to be your true self. And so your dislike of small talk is not a rejection of others. It is a longing for authenticity. It is your soul's protest against being trapped in the mask for too long. It is the cry of your inner being saying, "Let me out. Let me breathe. Let me be seen." Jung said that the persona is necessary, but limited. Necessary because it allows us to live in society. Limited because it can never contain the fullness of who we are. And when life becomes dominated by the mask, when you spend your days in conversations that never go deeper than polite surfaces, you begin to feel the slow suffocation of the soul. That is why the moment the mask slips, even for a second, you feel relief. That is why when someone unexpectedly says something real, something vulnerable, something honest, your energy floods back. You lean in, you awaken, you feel alive. Because in that moment, the mask is gone. two souls have met, however briefly. And so, if you find yourself shrinking away from small talk, if you feel secretly restless or exhausted by it, do not mistake this for rudeness. It is simply your soul resisting the weight of the mask. It is your deeper self reminding you that life is too short to be lived entirely through the persona. Segment 4. The Shadow, the Hunger for Realness. Carl Jung often spoke of something most people prefer to ignore, the shadow. The shadow, in his view, is the hidden half of the human soul, the part we push away, repress, or deny. It contains the sides of ourselves that we feel are unacceptable, embarrassing, or dangerous. But it also contains treasures we have never dared to claim: creativity, power, raw vitality, and unexpressed truth. When you find yourself trapped in small talk, you are not just restless because the conversation is shallow. You are restless because small talk leaves no room for the shadow. These polite exchanges skim surfaces, circling safe topics that require nothing from us but a smile. They avoid vulnerability, they avoid authenticity, and they avoid the raw truths that make us human. But your unconscious knows. Deep down, you sense what is missing. You feel the absence of depth, the absence of risk, the absence of reality. And so while the words flow politely, your soul grows uneasy. It whispers, "We are not being honest here. We are hiding. We are avoiding. We are wearing masks while the truth waits in silence." Think of the last time you sat across from someone and felt that urge, the urge to say something real, to cut through the ritual and ask what was actually on their heart. Maybe you stopped yourself, afraid of breaking the social script. Maybe you smiled instead, nodded, and played along. Outwardly, nothing was wrong. Inwardly, you felt that sharp sting of hollowness, the sense that you had missed the chance to meet a human soul. This is the hunger of the shadow. It longs to be acknowledged. It longs to be spoken. And small talk starves it. Jung once wrote, "What we do not make conscious appears in our lives as fate." In other words, what we refuse to confront in ourselves will eventually surface in the world around us. The shadow will not stay silent forever. If you push it down, it leaks out through your moods, your irritations, your restlessness, your sense of alienation. That deep discomfort you feel during endless chatter, that is your shadow calling. And the irony is this: many people believe that engaging in small talk makes them sociable, likable, and connected. But the truth is, the more we hide behind surfaces, the more disconnected we become. Because we are not meeting each other. Our masks are meeting, our personas are conversing, but our souls remain untouched. And you who feel uneasy in these moments are the one who notices. It may feel like a burden, this sensitivity. It may make you think you are the problem, the strange one, the antisocial one. But in reality, it is a gift. Because what you are noticing in those moments is not your own failure, it is the absence of truth. You are the one awake enough to realize that words without depth are not nourishment, they are noise. Picture this: someone asks how you are doing. The script says you should respond, "I'm fine," and you? And so you do. But inside, you know you are not fine. You are tired, or sad, or overwhelmed, or perhaps even joyful, in a way too profound to fit into such a small box. The shadow knows. It holds those truths. And yet the conversation never touches them. Instead, it remains locked in the safety of ritual. And as a result, you walk away unseen. Now consider the times when you have allowed a conversation to go deeper. Perhaps it was late at night when defenses were lowered. Perhaps it was with a friend who finally dared to say, "Actually, I'm not okay." And in that moment, something shifted. You felt alive. You felt connected. You felt the relief of truth breaking through. That was the shadow being spoken, not hidden. That was authenticity, and it nourished you in a way small talk never could. This is why Jung believed that the shadow is not something to be feared, but something to be integrated. To bring the shadow into consciousness is to bring wholeness to the self. And so your dislike of small talk is not a weakness. It is a reflection of your hunger for integration. It is your psyche's way of saying, don't settle for masks. Don't settle for rituals. Go deeper. Face what is real. And yes, this can be frightening, because the shadow does not only contain beauty, it contains darkness as well. It holds wounds, traumas, impulses we wish we didn't have. To invite the shadow into conversation is to risk encountering pain. It is to risk vulnerability. But it is also to risk truth. And for those who long for authenticity, even the pain of truth is more bearable than the emptiness of surfaces. So when you recoil from small talk, when you feel that inner frustration building, pause and listen. That is your shadow whispering. That is your soul reminding you that life is too short to spend it endlessly circling what is safe, while the deeper parts of yourself remain hidden. Jung would say that in order to live fully, you must face the shadow, not avoid it. And one of the first steps is simply noticing when life has become too shallow, too ritualized, too polite to be real. That discomfort you feel is not an enemy. It is a signal. It is your own unconscious calling you to truth. Segment 5. The Symbolism of Conversation. Carl Jung often reminded us that the psyche speaks in symbols. Dreams, myths, rituals, even the smallest of everyday habits are not random. They are symbolic expressions of the soul. If we want to understand ourselves, we must look beneath the literal and see the meaning carried by images and patterns. And conversation, too, is symbolic. The way we speak to each other, the words we choose, the silences we avoid, all reveal something about the state of our inner world. Think of small talk. On the surface, it seems harmless, even necessary. A way to pass the time, to break the ice, to smooth social interaction. But symbolically, what does small talk represent? It represents staying on the surface. It is like standing at the shoreline of a vast ocean and never daring to step into the water. The waves lap at your feet, but the depths remain untouched. You talk about the weather, about the latest news, about things that are safe because they demand nothing from you. No risk, no vulnerability, no truth. Only ritual. For many people, this is enough. The shoreline is comfortable. They do not want to plunge into the depths. They fear what might be down there, shadows, fears, uncomfortable truths, and so they stay on the sand where everything feels predictable. But for others, for those of you who find small talk unbearable, this safety feels like suffocation, because symbolically the ocean is calling. You feel restless at the shoreline. Your soul longs to dive. You want to know what lies beneath, even if it is frightening, even if it is uncertain. You crave the mystery, the rawness, the depth. This is why shallow conversation feels empty. It is not simply that the topic is boring. It is that symbolically you are being asked to stay at the shoreline while your very being longs for the dive. And so you feel the strange ache, the tension that builds in your chest, the impatience that you can hardly explain. It is your unconscious reminding you that surfaces are not enough. Now consider what happens when a conversation shifts. Imagine sitting with someone late at night, when the day is done, when masks are tired, when pretense fades. Suddenly, the words change. Someone admits they are afraid. Someone wonders about the meaning of life. Someone confesses a doubt or a longing. And in that moment, it is as if you both stepped off the sand and plunged into the water. You feel alive again. The heaviness in your chest lifts. The conversation flows with depth, carrying you into mystery. That is the soul speaking. That is the symbolism of depth. Jung would say that this symbolic longing is part of individuation, the process of becoming whole. Small talk belongs to the persona. It is about appearances, roles, and social ritual. But real conversation belongs to the self, the deeper center of your being. It is the self that longs to be revealed, not just the mask. And when you refuse to settle for surfaces, it is because your self is insisting on truth. Even silence itself carries symbolic weight. Small talk fears silence. It rushes to fill every gap with words, no matter how empty. But silence, when shared authentically, is not absence. It is presence. It is depth. Think of how different it feels to sit in silence with someone you trust compared to the silence after small talk ends awkwardly. One silence is emptiness, the other is fullness. One feels hollow, the other feels sacred. This too is the symbolism of conversation. Words can connect us, but they can also block us. Small talk is like a locked door that never opens. Real conversation is like a doorway into another person's soul. And when that door remains closed too long, you feel unseen. Your dislike of small talk is simply the longing for the door to open. So let us see small talk for what it is. It is not just chatter about the weather. It is a symbol of life at the surface. And your refusal of it, your restlessness in the face of it, is not arrogance. It is your unconscious crying out for depth, for authenticity, for meaning. It is your soul saying, I cannot live at the shoreline. I must dive. And perhaps this is why, when you finally encounter someone who speaks with honesty, who dares to reveal themselves, who does not hide behind ritual, you feel such relief. You feel as if you have been starving and suddenly offered food, because symbolically that is exactly what has happened. Small talk is like eating air. Real conversation is like eating bread. One leaves you empty, the other sustains you. Jung believed that symbols are bridges between the conscious and unconscious, and so when you dislike small talk, when you crave depth, you are responding not just to words but to the symbolic weight of words. You are refusing to live only in the conscious surface. You are demanding that the unconscious, with all its mystery, be invited into the exchange. This is why your soul is restless in small talk, because symbolically it represents a refusal to dive, a refusal to risk truth. And your very being, oriented toward authenticity, cannot accept that. It wants the plunge, it wants the risk, it wants the ocean, not just the shore. Segment 6. The restlessness of the soul. Think back to the last time you found yourself in the middle of small talk. Perhaps it was during a work lunch or a family gathering, or even while waiting for an appointment when someone decided to fill the silence with casual chatter. The words floated back and forth, harmless in themselves, and yet, with each exchange, you felt your body stiffen, your mind begin to drift, your patience slowly thinning. Outwardly you smiled, nodded, and responded just as expected, but inwardly something in you recoiled. You felt the creeping heaviness, the itch of boredom, the invisible fatigue that no amount of polite effort could erase. When it was finally over and you were free to retreat into silence, you may have felt the immense relief of being alone again. You may have taken a deep breath, felt your shoulders drop, and thought to yourself, why did that simple conversation feel so exhausting? The answer, through Jung's eyes, is that your psyche is not nourished by surfaces. It longs for meaning in the same way the body longs for food. And when you are deprived of meaning, when you are asked again and again to remain at the level of surfaces, the soul begins to grow restless. This restlessness is not irritation at people, not hatred of company, but a hunger that has not been fed. Small talk offers nothing to the deeper self. It is like chewing without swallowing, tasting without nourishing. The words pass through the air, but never touch the roots of your being. And so you leave the exchange not fuller, but emptier, as though a small part of your energy has been drained away. This is why, after a day filled with shallow interaction, you may come home and collapse into silence. The body is not tired, but the soul is weary. You may crave solitude, not because you dislike others, but because only in solitude can you finally return to yourself, to meaning, to depth. Carl Jung understood this restlessness well. He believed that every soul is guided by the process he called individuation, the unfolding of the self into its true wholeness. Individuation is not about pleasing others or conforming to rituals. It is about becoming what you truly are, integrating both the conscious and unconscious parts of your being. And this process does not thrive in noise. It does not thrive in chatter. It requires silence, reflection, and encounters with authenticity. So when you feel restless in small talk, when you feel that subtle ache that asks, "When will this end?" see it for what it truly is, not a flaw in your character, but the whisper of individuation. It is your unconscious nudging you away from surfaces and toward the deeper path of becoming yourself. Think of how many times you have smiled while inside you longed for something real. Perhaps you have laughed at a polite joke while your heart was quietly heavy. Perhaps you have asked someone how they were doing, only to hear the ritualized response, "I'm fine," knowing that behind those words lay a whole world of unspoken truth. Perhaps you too responded with the same phrase, "I'm fine," while inside you carried burdens no one could see. This is the tragedy of small talk. It trains us to hide, to remain unseen, to silence the soul in the name of politeness. And this is why it feels so hollow to those who are attuned to depth, because you can sense that behind every polite exchange lies something greater, something real, something waiting to be spoken. You sense that beneath the calm surface, every human being carries shadows, dreams, wounds, and longings. And when these remain unspoken, the encounter feels incomplete, as though you brushed against another life without ever touching it. Now, consider the contrast. Think about the rare times when you have allowed yourself to move past the ritual. Maybe it was late at night, in the quiet of a kitchen, when someone confessed they were afraid of the future. Maybe it was during a walk, when a friend admitted that they were struggling. Maybe it was in your own heart, when you dared to say out loud, "Actually, I'm not fine." In those moments, didn't you feel alive? Didn't you feel the restlessness melt away, replaced by a strange, nourishing calm? That is because the soul had been fed. The conversation had crossed from surface to depth, from mask to truth. Jung believed that this restlessness we feel when life remains shallow is not an inconvenience, but a guide. It is the psyche's way of steering us toward individuation. It is the soul's refusal to waste itself on surfaces. The discomfort you feel in small talk is not meaningless. It is a signpost pointing to your hunger for authenticity. So when you find yourself fidgeting inwardly during small talk, do not simply scold yourself for impatience. Do not tell yourself you are broken or antisocial. Instead, listen carefully. That restlessness is your unconscious speaking. It is saying, "This is not enough. You need more. You need silence. You need truth. You need depth. And if you listen, you may begin to honor your own limits. You may find the courage to say no to endless chatter, to retreat when you must, to create space for solitude, to seek out those rare souls who, like you, long to dive beneath the surface. Because ultimately, individuation requires courage, the courage to value your own truth even when the world tells you to keep smiling and play along. Your dislike of small talk is not a rejection of others. It is the yearning of the soul for what is real. It is the hunger for bread in a world that offers only air. And when you honor that hunger, when you allow yourself to step away from the surface and seek depth, you are not being strange or unfriendly. You are being faithful to your own becoming. Segments 7. Archetypes, Conclusion, and the Gift of Depth. Carl Jung taught that within every human soul live timeless patterns of energy, archetypes. They are not roles we consciously choose, but forces that shape us from within. When you find yourself restless in small talk, when you feel the hollowness of surfaces, it may be because certain archetypes are alive in you. Perhaps it is the seeker, whose very nature is to wander past surfaces in search of truth. The seeker cannot stay satisfied with polite rituals, for the seeker's compass points only toward what is real. Or perhaps it is the sage, the figure of wisdom, who feels most alive when ideas are deep, when the soul is touched, when knowledge is pursued. And sometimes it is the outsider, the one who stands at the edge of society, sensing what others do not see, unwilling to play along with rituals that feel empty. These archetypes, when they stir within you, make it nearly impossible to tolerate endless chatter. They draw you inward. They demand honesty. They remind you that life is short, and that every human encounter has the possibility of depth, if only we dare to reach for it. And so, when you dislike small talk, it is not because you dislike people. It is because you are guided by archetypes that call you beyond surfaces, into the places where truth lives. You are not rejecting connection. You are protecting it, waiting for the moment when it becomes real. This is the gift of disliking small talk. It shows you that your soul refuses to live only in masks. It shows you that you are built for authenticity, for silence when silence is honest, for speech when speech is true. And in a world that too often drowns in chatter, your longing for depth is not a weakness, it is wisdom. So the next time you feel that familiar unease, the next time you find yourself nodding politely while inside, you are longing for something more. Remember this: it is not a flaw, it is a compass. It is the voice of your own becoming, urging you toward authenticity. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate what matters most." Your dislike of small talk is simply your soul refusing loneliness. It is your soul insisting that life is too precious to be wasted on words that do not matter. Honor that, trust that, and know that in the silence of your retreat and in the rare conversations where truth emerges, you are closer to your true self than most ever dare to be. Because in the end, the world does not need more small talk. It needs more souls who are brave enough to say, "I want something real." And perhaps that is exactly why you are here.